let's dive right into this explainer. Look, if you're thinking about investing in U.S. property right now, you already know the landscape has totally shifted. I mean, we are way past that wild post-pandemic hype. Today, we're unpacking the actual location-based data to show you exactly where the smart money is looking for 2026. With headlines screaming about a housing recession and skyrocketing costs, the national narrative is basically just doom and gloom. Oversupply, stalled transactions, you name it. But here's the insider secret. This is absolutely not a uniform, nationwide housing recession. It's a deeply bifurcated market. So for those who know exactly where to look, 2026 actually represents a highly targeted, strategic entry window that separates savvy investors from the panicked masses. To understand where we're going, we kind of have to look at how we got here. Get this. Nationwide home prices have surged an unbelievable 54% since 2020. According to the State of the Nation's Housing 2026 report, the median sales price for an existing single-family home is now nearly 5 times the median household income. That completely shatters historical norms. But why does this matter for you? Well, because that massive barrier for new buyers creates a huge captive audience of long-term renters. And honestly, that is your opportunity. Now combine that insane price surge with a record low residential mobility rate of just 11.2%, and we're looking at a historic nationwide housing squeeze. It's what we call the golden handcuff effect. Homeowners who locked in those sweet, below-market mortgage rates are simply not moving. The share of households relocating has dropped to an absolute record low, leaving us with a major affordability crisis wrapped in frozen inventory. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll cover the 2026 housing squeeze. Second, the Sunbelt correction. Third, Northeast and Midwest surprises. Fourth, the top states and cities. And finally, the build-to-rent boom. Let's get into it. Starting with Section 1, the 2026 housing squeeze, focusing on those macro headwinds. You know, household growth is a massive driver of real estate, but right now, it's pretty much stalled out for the third consecutive year. The Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies points out that a stagnant labor market and plummeting immigration are severely dampening overall demand. Between high student debt keeping young adults from forming households and international migration getting cut in half, the macro environment is undeniably tough. Moving on to Section 2, the Sunbelt correction. We're looking at myth versus reality here. For years, the Sunbelt was literally the undisputed darling of real estate, but markets like Austin, they became dangerously detached from local income fundamentals. Austin went on this wild 72.5% tear between 2020 and 2022, fueled almost entirely by out-of-state buyers and cheap capital. And man, if you bought at the peak, you're probably feeling that 26% correction right about now. See, builders rushed to meet that pandemic demand, unleashing just a tidal wave of construction. Actually, more than half of the 506,000 new apartments that opened nationwide recently were delivered in the South. This has led to a massive oversupply that's forcing prolonged concessions and driving rents and prices down. The days of just throwing a dart at a map of the Sunbelt and making a profit, yeah, those are over. Precision is absolutely required now. Which brings us to Section 3, Northeast and Midwest surprises. These are the real dark horses of this market. Just look at this geographic divide. The heavily supplied Sunbelt is dealing with a pretty classic boom and bust cycle, while the Northeast is completely defying the gravity of the housing recession. Markets like Boston and New York City didn't rely on some sudden wave of remote workers. They have deep, diversified economies and severe geographic constraints on new construction, which naturally prevents the kind of supply glut that's crashing the South right now. The Northeast completely avoided those dizzying price valleys. In fact, New Jersey and Connecticut remarkably posted 5% annual home price gains. But honestly, the biggest shocker is the Midwest, which just recorded net domestic inflows for the first time in over 20 years. If you're an income-focused investor, cities like Indianapolis and Cleveland offer below-average purchase prices that translate directly into highly resilient, double-digit gross rental yields. It's fantastic. Forbes really hit the nail on the head with this one. Geography is not just a backdrop, it is the thesis. The Northeast remained disciplined while other markets just chased momentum. The specific location you choose and the underlying local fundamentals of that location will entirely dictate your success in 2026. All right, Section 4, top states and cities and exactly where the data points. When it comes to actually keeping your returns, state taxes change the game completely. According to the 2026 Country Tax Calc rankings, Florida takes the #1 spot overall, largely thanks to zero income tax on rental income and capital gains, paired with strong appreciation. Tennessee is brilliant for pure cash flow, since they have very low property taxes. Texas is still an appreciation powerhouse despite having higher property taxes. And North Carolina offers a beautifully balanced market with strong job growth and solid landlord protections. Looking at PwC's top 5 markets to watch, Dallas/Fort Worth holds the crown, continuing its run as a perennial favorite, leading the U.S. in job gains. But the real story here is the Northeast ascending. I mean, who would have thought Jersey City would jump 17 spots to become the number 2 market overall, or Brooklyn jumping 10 spots to number 4? This really confirms that the greater New York area's fundamentals are exceptionally strong right now. So, what does this actually mean for you? Well, it means shifting your mindset. You're no longer just hoping a property's value goes up based on pure speculation. Instead, you're securing strong monthly cash flow because rents are climbing faster than purchase prices in these key metros. That specific dynamic is exactly the blueprint you need for winning long-term yields.
And finally, Section 5, the build-to-rent boom. This is a massive 2026 strategy.
Build-to-rent has evolved from a niche post-pandemic trend into a highly durable strategy. We are not just talking about isolated houses scattered around town anymore. These are entire neighborhoods built from scratch to act like luxury apartment complexes for families. They're professionally managed, extremely scalable, and perfectly serve demographics who desperately want the space of a house but are currently priced out of buying one. Believe it or not, single-family homes built specifically as rentals accounted for a staggering 16% of all new rental units recently. That's nearly 3 times its historical average. This isn't just a small, quirky segment of the market anymore. It has literally become a central, dominant pillar of residential investment portfolios. Think about it. When households want the white picket fence but can only afford rent, you get a record 113,000 completions and a massive 93% stabilized occupancy rate. The structural demands case here is undeniably real, and it's driven entirely by that widening disconnect between what families want and what they can actually afford. Institutional money is definitely noticing, with 76% reporting positive sentiment for these acquisitions, and you should definitely be noticing too. Now, I know we discussed oversupply in parts of the Sun Belt earlier, but the broader Southeast is still the absolute prime engine for suburban expansion. You just have to target the specific submarkets. Places like Charlotte, Atlanta, and Raleigh remain absolute goldmines where population growth, job creation, and affordability pressures heavily overlap to absorb new build-to-rent supply without forcing rental concessions. To win in this space, you absolutely have to nail these 3 underwriting steps. Operating expenses for build-to-rent properties rose 3.2% year-over-year recently, outpacing rent growth in many areas. So, the smart money in 2026 isn't asking how fast can rents grow. They're asking how durable is this cash flow. Target stable residents, manage those expense pressures, and watch local supply pipelines like a hawk. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to help guide your next major real estate move. Are you chasing yesterday's momentum or investing in tomorrow's fundamentals? The landscape of 2026 is brutally honest. Chasing pandemic momentum in oversupplied markets brings massive risks. But if you pivot toward constrained supply in the Northeast, high-yield cash flows in the Midwest, or expertly underwritten build-to-rent communities in the Southeast, the potential is phenomenal. The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.